put down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news, tips, and your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, thanks for joining me for another live episode of TOGCHAT. Before we get going, I need you all to please take a moment, tell your photography friends that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. You know that Twitter, Facebook, they are the fastest and easiest way to get the word out. You can click the share button right underneath the video or share the link tog.chat/live. I'm going to paste it in the chat window for you right now. Now, we have a lot of photographers that are tuning in from all over the world. So please be sure to check in, leave a comment, let me know you're here and where you're watching from. And of course, be sure to start posting your questions and topics for tonight's live TOG Q&A. As always, I'll do my best to answer them all in the next 60 minutes. We're going to dive right in with a recent chat that I had with a good friend and fellow portrait photographer, John Cornicello. John is a guy who, like me, has been in the business since the late 1970s, and he's seen the industry through many of its changes. So I wanted to chat with him about that evolution as well as his work. John, thanks so much for joining me on TOGCHAT.
Good to be here.
Great to have you, and it's great to see you again. I saw you just a couple weeks ago out in Seattle at the Kenmore camera event, and you are located in Seattle, correct?
I am, downtown Seattle, yes.
Awesome. Well, John, the reason I wanted to have you as a guest, aside from the fact that I'm a big fan of your photography and obviously, you know, watching you on CreativeLIVE and seeing so much of your work, our careers kind of got started around the same time in the late 70s. I hate having to say that, but
it is.
We've both been through, you know, quite a bit of the industry, and we've seen a lot change. So what I'd like to do, if I could just start, is for those of my audience that are not familiar with you yet, that are just learning about you for the first time, can I have you just kind of introduce yourself, tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure.
And then I'd like to kind of maybe reminisce with you a little bit about, you know, how the industry has changed and evolved, or I don't know, maybe how much it actually hasn't changed or evolved. So what should people know about John?
Let's see, I'm originally from New York. I started working in catalog studios in around 1979, and we shot everything to size on 11x14 cameras, hot lights, big booms and lights, and yeah, it was pretty interesting times. 11x14 sheets of Ektachrome. It's quite amazing to look at.
Yeah.
To think how much we've changed since then. So I always joke with people that I've worked my way down in size. I started out with 11x14 and now I'm down to 35 millimeter size digital.
There you go.
So yeah, I worked in the catalog studios for a few years, and I started my own studio for a short while.
Okay. Now, was that still on the East Coast? Or?
I was still in New York.
Okay.
And then computers came around, and I started building databases for my billing and clients and the like. And I started getting other photographers asking me more about computer stuff. And I got into computers for a while, which got me into typesetting for a while.
Huh.
Then I moved to Seattle and went to work for Adobe for 20 years.
Wow. Now, what for Adobe?
Adobe, I did online communities. So basically, I watch people yell at each other a lot.
There is that, yeah.
And in the meanwhile, I still moonlighted doing my photography stuff.
Okay.
I used to kind of sometimes joke that my photography was my job and Adobe was my moonlighting thing, but they kept putting money in my bank account, so it stood there for quite a while.
I understand how that goes, for sure. Well, and now most of your work now, what are you shooting mostly?
Mostly corporate headshots.
Okay.
And theater promotional things for local theaters.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I get to work with a lot of actors, and on my own, I do a lot of figure photography and experimenting with lighting patterns and things like that, and teaching.
Yep.
I'm 62 now, starting to slow down a little bit, you know, trying to cut back on, not slow down, but cut back on things, and we're teaching and try to get, you know, people taught me, it's my turn to start passing that stuff.
Sure. No, I understand how that goes. Now, we've seen you on CreativeLIVE, correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
that was an interesting time there. Though it's about 9 years worth of videos, working with
Okay.
some of the greatest photographers around. It was always fun because we'd bounce off each other,
Right.
and get the knowledge out there.
That's
Um,
cool. Now,
yeah.
if I understand correctly, you kind of started like behind the scenes there, right? You were
Yeah,
a lighting guy.
you're right. I would do the lighting for all the photographers that were coming in to teach. So I'd
Okay.
be back there moving lights around, and
Cool.
you know, yeah, it was just mind reading was what I called it most of the time.
Yeah.
What people used to like about it is, someone would say, "Well, what if we try this?" And I just hand it to them.
Yep.
It's, wait a minute, I didn't ask for it yet. I've been doing this for 30 years, so I know what you're
And
going to ask
that's
for.
what a good assistant does. Exactly. Right. I can't tell you how many interns and assistants I have frustrated the heck out of when I
Mhm,
explained to them that a big part of their job was thinking what I was thinking before
mhm.
I thought it. So,
Yes, exactly. That's what my job was there, is to be a mind reader.
yep.
And
That's awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. So I have to ask. I mean, my audience hears me talk a lot about my career path and the
Hmm.
things that I've done, and um, I will admit part of the reason why I enjoy having guests on is not only to introduce my audience to other photographers
Hmm.
and other points of view, but also sometimes to kind of hammer home some of my own points of view
Of
to say,
course.
hey, it's not just me. I'm not giving you some crazy stuff here. Um, so I'm gonna start with the big one, and we'll,
Yeah.
we'll see where this takes us. And so you've been in this business since the late '70s.
Hmm.
Um, let's leave the tech out of it
Sure.
because the tech stuff's pretty obvious. You've already talked about some of that, going from 11
Yeah.
by 14 film to a 35 millimeter digital format. But which of course that means you're a full frame shooter, but that's okay. Um, how have you seen the business change? The making money part of it, the dealing with
Hmm.
clients part.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing because I started out, as I say, doing product and still life photography and working for ad agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very different than working for smaller clients like headshots and the like.
Right.
But that's pretty much the same, the business side of it. It's interesting. I have a book from the 1940s by Fred Archer called Fred Archer on Portraiture. And
Mm-hmm.
in the introduction to it, he talks about the war going on and the boys are overseas and people in the country that are still here are putting up shingles and buying these small little cameras and becoming photographers. And soon everyone's a photographer and it's going to ruin the industry. And that was 1945.
That sounds
Yeah.
very familiar. I think that
Yes,
got recycled recently, didn't
it
it?
gets recycled every 10 years,
Yep.
so, but otherwise it's all staying pretty much the same.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, why do you, from your perspective,
Hmm.
and this is kind of a tough question because sometimes it's one of those tough truths, but I get this question a lot, and I have a pretty blunt answer for it. But why do you think that is? Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah.
in our industry, we have a lot of people that honestly they do a lot of whining.
Hmm.
And it is that same whining of like, hey, everybody's a photographer.
Sure.
It's impossible to make a buck. But yet, with a minimal amount of research and
Hmm.
effort, we can find some photographers that are making some damn good money.
Yeah, it's not me,
And
but
so, why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think that we have that kind of pervasive philosophy of like, oh, it's impossible, but yet there's still people out there making
it's out there.
money?
I mean, it's confidence in yourself, confidence in what you're doing, and knowing that there's millions of people out there that need photography.
Right.
I don't do weddings, but there's how many weddings a weekend in your town alone?
Sure.
I mean, there's plenty of business to go around, for different levels. I mean, there's people who are in the $200 range is what they can afford for a wedding. Fine. I mean, that's where they're at. We
Yep.
can't do anything about that. There's $10,000 weddings. Find your place and start building yourself up. If you just pick up your camera and you want to do a $10,000 wedding, maybe there are too many people out there
Right.
to competing with you. But
Right.
it's get your confidence, get your skill level up, know what you're doing,
Right.
be prepared, and I think you can start moving up. Cooperate with your local, co-opetition as they sometimes call it instead of competition.
That's actually a
Work
great
work
word.
with each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because for me, I started as a newspaper photographer, which
Hmm.
by design is a very competitive kind of business. And
Yeah.
especially back in the '70s, it was a much different beast than what it is now. But when it came to the portrait, the wedding side, and even the commercial advertising side, I mean, obviously New York, it's a jungle, man. There's a finite amount of work, and there was a lot of people that wanted it. But yet, the people that were actually making money, whenever I met them and got to spend time with guys in New York that were doing well, the thing that always struck me about them is they never actually seemed to have the stress of competition. It didn't seem to faze them. It didn't seem to bother them. If I heard them talk about stress, the stress was more a matter of what are they going to do next? It was always a kind of about finding that next thing, finding that next idea. It wasn't about, hey, there's some other guy over my shoulder.
Right.
They seemed to be very, I don't know, maybe they weren't aware. Maybe they were actually just completely ignorant of it, and that's what worked. But they were focused on what they were doing.
Well, I mean, a
not
difference
what
back
the next
then.
guy was doing.
Yeah, difference back then was we didn't have the internet. You didn't see all these people all the time. I mean, you worked in the photo district, was a small area like around 5th Avenue and 20th Street or so, or 23rd. So you talk to people in the shops like the set shop or the camera stores and things like that. But you didn't see a big audience as you do now. Everyone's online talking about their problems and whining about it. I mean, there's probably whining back then, but you just only talk to 3 people in a week instead of 3 people an hour.
Right, exactly. Right. There is that. The way word of mouth worked back then was a lot slower in general.
Yeah, work with photographers, we'd finish a job and he'd say at the end, okay, my career's over. I don't have anything else lined up. Next week he calls me to assist him again. And okay, I got a job this week, but now my career's over again. Yeah. But it kept going on. It's interesting. The studio I started in, I think it was 1981 or 82, is actually still going.
Is it really?
The person I shared it with is still in there, in that space. Okay. And what's really funny about it is Adorama sometimes uses that studio for their tutorials.
Okay.
When they say, that stuff all looks really familiar there. The tool chest over in that corner. And then when they did a pullback, said, oh, that's my studio. And it's still cool. Ongoing. So yeah, feel good about that.
Very cool. Have you ever had a chance to go back and do some stuff with Adorama there?
No, I have. I've been back to the studio to visit there about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. All looks the same as it did.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I will say there's something, there's something special about a New York studio. They're just right? So, having been in the business for as long as we have, I get asked a lot as if I'm actually capable of seeing into the future. Where do I see the business going? It's frequently from the same people that kind of are whining about how many photographers and, you can take great pictures with a cell phone and all this stuff, which, by the way, I think it's amazing that we can take great pictures with a cell phone. But, where do you see it going? What do you see? Because, I mean, there's, obviously there's nonstop debates over, is this format going to go away, or is this camera brand going to go away, or will smartphones replace cameras? Well, I don't want to say what I say because I routinely say it, but I'm curious. Like, where do you see the business going?
I don't know. I don't think about it all that often. I mean, I worry about what I'm doing, what the job is I have today and tomorrow. The equipment I have is working. I can't get into the whole thing. There's people talking about there's maybe a new camera from Canon that's a hybrid. It's like, so what? Right. And it doesn't make sense to me. Once the camera's in my hand, then I'll use it. The smartphone. I mean, I tend to be a telephoto guy. I see things at a distance. So the phones don't do that. Even the new twin lens or 3-lens ones don't really do that. So I can't see it replacing things that I do. Right. I mean, cell phones are wide angle. I don't live in a wide angle world.
Yeah. Now, would you say that's a general preference, the telephoto for you? Or is it strictly because of, your primary work being about people and portrait type work?
It's probably people and portraits, but I think landscape should be done with a longer lens too. I mean, Ansel Adams wasn't a wide angle. Right. He's shooting 8x10 with 200 or 300 or 400 millimeter lens on there. 4x5, they usually like 165 to 210 or so. Yep. And what I think I want people to understand is everything in photography has to do with distance.
Mm-hmm.
Lighting, distance, the closer the light is to the subject, the darker the background is going to be. Um,
Right.
Lenses, everyone talks about telephoto compression. And to me, there's no such thing as telephoto compression. You put on the telephoto lens, you move back. That compression is from moving back.
Right.
If you shot with a wide angle and telephoto from the same distance and crop them together, you have the same
Exactly the same.
perspective. It's distance. Start to understand distances, and you can really push yourself ahead in your education.
I agree.
Um,
So I want to change gears a second
Yeah.
here, John. I learned a lesson from a mentor of mine just a couple of years ago. This was a mentor from when I was in junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into the guy online, and we made a date to go and have lunch. And I went with the attitude like, I should try and impress this man. So of course we sat down, and he's asking me all about, my life and my career, and I'm telling him all these great things. And he says, so how are things now? Like, well, how's your business going? All this stuff. And I'm telling him all this, and I get done. And he just very calmly says to me, so what are you doing for fun? And I was like, well, I've got 2 grandkids. He's like, no. With your camera, what are you doing for fun? And just stopped me dead in my tracks. Like, I've never done for fun. I mean, yeah, every now and then I get some crazy idea, and that's fun. But I've never had a project.
Yeah.
So I know that you have this project that you're working on called the Chair Project, which I'm going to show folks some images while you're talking. But tell me about the Chair Project, and tell me about why those projects or these kind of projects are important to you.
Sure. The Chair Project came along because I was at a garage sale at another photo studio, and there was this great chair there for $5 that my wife liked, and she said we should take it home. And I took it home, and I took a selfie of myself in it, posted it online, and people started asking me if they can come pose in the chair. And that's how that started. And I've got probably 800 people in the chair. It started out with this green chair. A couple of years later, I added an egg chair. And every once in a while, if I'm out somewhere and I find an interesting chair and some people around to photograph, I'll throw them in there. But it's primarily the green chair and the egg chair. And that's been going on for about 4 years. And as I say, like around 800 people
That's
have been
awesome.
through there.
Now, do you have an end game with this project?
No. People ask, you're going to do a book? I said, I doubt it. Books are expensive.
Right.
Who's going to buy it? So it's just online galleries and fills up my Instagram. And it's just, for me, it's fun because I get to work with people. Something I often ask photographers is photography a product or a process? For me, it's the process. It's the working with the people. That we get a nice picture at the end, that's fine. But it's the interaction, getting to come in, talk to them, just interact with them, find out about them. That's the enjoyment for me, and that's where my fun comes in, just hanging out with people and getting photos of them.
And there's more. So first of all, John, thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me. But what the rest of you need to know is there's a lot more to the interview. What I'm going to start doing on an ongoing basis is giving you folks during TOGCHAT Live 15 to 20 minutes of these interviews that I'm doing, these chats. But on Friday, when the podcast drops, if you download the podcast, you'll be able to listen to the rest of the interview. So I have placed the link once again in the chat window for the podcast. It's tog.chat/podcast. It is available on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. It's on all of them. But there's some other things that I want to point out to you folks about John, and I want you to go do a little bit of research. Number one, I hope that you picked up on some of his philosophies and the way he approaches his photography, and the fact that it's not about all the hype and the BS. It is really about the access to people and being able to interact with people, and it's the basics that drive his photography. Now, I want you guys to know also, if you look in the description below the video, you'll also be able to find it in the show notes if you are listening to the podcast. John has an ebook that is all about lighting that I have had a chance to look through, and I highly recommend it. So I've got the link to his book there, and also the link to his websites and all of his information. But I want you guys to realize, and if you type John's name into YouTube, into the search bar at YouTube, you'll find some older videos of his, but you'll also find some images. Most of the shots of John's that you saw during my interview and that you'll find on his website are done in a home studio that is much smaller than the home studio that I have built here. So the point being, you can do this stuff in an incredibly small space. So I really seriously encourage you guys, check it out. John is an amazing guy. Some of you are asking, where's John located? He is located in Seattle, Washington, home of the infamous Seattle Softbox. For those of you that don't know what the Seattle Softbox is, they don't get a lot of sunny days in Seattle. They get a lot of cloudy and overcast days. So the fact of the matter is the Seattle Softbox is that beautiful, even, soft box of light that you get from the cloudy skies. So make sure you check out the rest of John's stuff. Friday afternoon, the podcast will be available on all of the various platforms, including my website at tog.chat/podcast. Download it, give it a listen. There's a lot of really cool nuggets yet to come in the rest of the interview. One last announcement for you guys, and then we'll move on. I've got one talk left for 2019, and it just so happens it is tomorrow night, which is kind of exciting. So tomorrow night, in fact, here, I'll switch over to my website just so that I can show you guys the link and how to find out about it. Even if you're not going to make this talk tomorrow, you should go ahead and bookmark this link so that you have it. It is joeedelman.com/edu for edu. All you have to do is click on the Speaking and Events tab up at the top. Tomorrow, I'm going to be right here in the Lehigh Valley, hometown, one town over, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Going to be speaking for the Lehigh Valley Photography Club, doing a talk that I first did this summer out in Cleveland at Pixel Photo Fest. Don't be afraid to suck if you want to find success as a photographer. It's one of probably the most fun talks that I have ever done. It's kind of a kick in the butt to kind of get you moving and get you a little bit more excited and focused on your photography. So if you can make it tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Banana Factory. Admission is free. Normally, it costs $10 if you're not a club member, but they were kind enough to waive the admission for anyone for this talk. And then my next talk's coming up, my next scheduled ones anyway, WPPI. I'll be doing a platform class at WPPI. In March, I'm going to be the keynote speaker for the Florida Camera Club Council. So I'll be talking for 3 days down there in Fort Myers. I will be attending Imaging USA for those of you that are going to imaging, just like walking around, checking things out, and enjoying the trade show and enjoying Nashville, because how can you not enjoy Nashville, right? But I will be there. That's coming up the end of next month. So I do hope to see some of you down there. But make sure you book those links. Hopefully, I'm going to get to see a bunch of you tomorrow night. It's time for the Q&A. So let's go ahead and dig into your questions. Now, I saw a bunch of questions come in earlier. I'm going to start on those. But hey, we got time here. It is only 6:23. So I still got like 37 minutes or so to answer questions. And you guys know I hardly ever manage to finish on time anyway. So start typing, get those questions in there. I'm going to slide back up to the top of the chat here. And we had a question come in early from Timber Geek. He says, I'm sure my questions will increase in a week or so. I've got a Flashpoint, which is, of course, Godox, the X Pro N trigger, which would be Nikon, and 2 used Godox flashes, the TT600 and the TT685N, on his way from Adorama. Oh, kind of see, actually, he didn't ask me a question, but he is saying time to break out the old bed sheets and baling wire to build some modifiers. And you know what, Timber Geek, I love hearing that kind of stuff because DIY is the bomb. I'm a big believer that every photographer needs to get their heads wrapped around the concept of doing some DIY. And I'll tell you why, folks. Like, seriously, even if you have the money that, you can go out and buy whatever. Understand that all good photography, I don't care what you're shooting, I don't care what you're shooting with, I don't care how you're shooting it. All good photographs are the result of problem solving. As photographers, we're really not that bright. We go out and we spend thousands of dollars on all this camera gear. And then once we have it, we're no longer satisfied with a photo. We have to have epic photos. So every time we see something, we create this problem because we want it to be epic. Well, for me, when I learned photography as a kid, I didn't have an unlimited budget. I couldn't go out and buy whatever gear that I wanted. I didn't have companies that were willing to send me samples. There's none of that stuff available. So I had to figure out how to do things with what I had available. So, Timber Geek's comment here about bed sheets and that kind of stuff, believe me, spot on. And even today, where I do have the good fortune of being sponsored by a camera company and having companies that are willing to send me stuff to try out, which is wonderful. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to my wallet and my credit cards and my bank account, I am going to invest my money in the stuff that really counts. The cameras and the glass, the lenses. That's where I want my money going. When it comes to accessories, sure, I will buy accessories if they are important to my work, if they're going to help me improve my work or do something much more efficiently. However, one of the criteria that accessory has to pass is how often am I going to use it? Is it something where I'm going to use it once or twice in the course of a year? If I'm only going to use it once or twice, and especially if I'm not going to make a ton of money using it once or twice, well, then in that case, I have to find a way to DIY it because I can't justify the cost. If it's something that I'm going to use all the time or really, really frequently, well then, okay, maybe it doesn't need to be DIY'd. Maybe it makes more sense to buy something that's already manufactured, etc. So, all of that being said, Timber Geek, I will look forward to your questions. Enjoy them. It's fun to get into lighting. I will tell you this, since you're kind of, getting a bunch of lights all at once, even though you've got them, even though you're going to be excited to get out there and start working with them, unpack them, set up one. Work with one. No modifiers, no bed sheets even, right? Just work with the one. Master lighting with one. Then add in the bed sheets and some of the chicken wire and go ahead and start making modifiers. Then add in a second light and then add in a third light. But take it a step at a time. I promise you, you will find that you will progress much faster with your understanding of all things lighting. And that's everything from placement of lights to the all-important inverse square law, all that kind of stuff. So again, one at a time, and then by all means, as you go forward, add it all in, okay? All right, let's see here. Scrolling on down some more. Alvin had a question here. Would love to see some ideas using umbrellas in unconventional ways. Reflective, not shoot through umbrellas. In terms of some ideas for using umbrellas in unconventional ways, Alvin, that's really kind of a matter of, well, what are you trying to accomplish in your shot? So again, the way that I approach stuff like this is not like, hey, I have an umbrella. What can I do that's weird with it? Now, admittedly, sometimes there are some pieces of technology that's exactly what I do. You have all seen the results and heard me talk about the live composite feature from Olympus. That was a scenario literally where here's this cool feature. It was meant for shooting car trails and shooting stars at night. And the portrait guy comes along and says, hey, I've got to find a way to hack this. But most of the time, when we talk about like with modifiers, umbrellas and things like that, for me, it's more a matter of I've got a visual in my head. I've got something that I am thinking would be a cool look that I want to accomplish. Then it's a matter of what am I going to use to accomplish that? And that, of course, starts with what modifiers do I have available, etc. So, if we're talking about a reflective umbrella and we're talking about doing things unconventionally, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that there's maybe a whole lot of unconventional things to do, but I will tell you one of the kind of, I hate to say obvious, but one thing that I've done with reflective umbrellas that would be considered unconventional is actually included them in the shot. I've done shots where I've used the umbrella and the spokes of the umbrella as a background, where I've had it mounted behind the model. So literally like the stem of the umbrella, like practically poking the model in the back, but I can then throw a light into the umbrella with a color gel if it's a big enough umbrella, and it creates a background. I have taken small speed lights and I slid them between the fabric and the frame of the umbrella so that they'll stay in the umbrella. Had the model, and this would be if it was a white or a silver reflective umbrella and a fairly big one, have the model hold the umbrella like it's outside and, you know, she's trying to protect herself from the rain. But then when the flash fires, of course, it's lighting the whole inside of the umbrella, which creates this really kind of cool top-down light all at the same time. In fact, WPPI 2 years ago, I actually did that on stage. So you can see that in my video from WPPI of 2018, okay? So that's the kind of stuff that for me is going to be the kind of the unconventional ways. But you know, honestly, the challenge that I would give you, Alvin, is if you have a reflective umbrella, dive in. Just dive in and start looking for ways. I mean, depending on how the umbrella is shaped and designed, you could even use the edges of it to create like an interesting half of a background, etc. Really a lot of cool things you can do. You just need to pick one up and play around and experiment. Okay? All right. Clive, you're looking at making a change from my Nikon system to Olympus. Hey, good for you. All right. Have you found more dust on your sensors without the mirror offering some protection? Absolutely not, because the Olympus cameras in particular have great sensor cleaning technology that, as far as I'm concerned, was much better than what I had in my DSLR cameras. So yeah, it's really not an issue. Plus, in all fairness, Clive, I have always been a person who is neurotic about dust when changing camera lenses. Always have been, probably always will be. So I'm one of those people, number one, the second a lens comes off my camera body, the camera body is always facing down. In other words, I never leave it up with, you know, the lens off, because then it stands a better chance of collecting dust. You know, additionally, once I take that lens off, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the rear element covered. Then I'm going to pick up the other lens, uncap it, and I'm going to attach it to the camera. So, so I do take care in that regard, and I think it's very important to do that regardless of what kind of technology is in your camera, and even regardless of what kind of cleaning technology is in your camera. But I can tell you honestly, no, I have had no issues whatsoever. In fact, just 2 months ago in New York, Photo Plus, I had my first EM1 Mark II, my first Olympus EM1 Mark II cleaned for the very first time. So that camera was 2.5 years old. I'd never had it cleaned, never cleaned the sensor, never had a problem. So that's 2.5 years with that camera. And since they had the clean and check crew at Photo Plus, I went ahead and asked them to clean this stuff for me. But that's the first time I've had that camera cleaned, and you know, they said it was in great shape, and I had not had any problems with dust whatsoever. So, all right, what do we got here next? Let's see. David, greeting from Spain. And by the way, the rant about the state of the industry was pretty amazing. Bravo. Thank you. I appreciate the kind words and support. I really do. Let's see. I know we got a bunch more here. Let me just scroll down to where the end of the interview was. Northern California is a big softbox now, right? I can imagine. I mean, there's a lot of crazy weather going on. Darko, I'm glad to hear that you are subscribed to the newsletter. Awesome. Chuck Hill, if you ask Alexa to play your podcast, will she be able to find it? Chuck, I think the key with that is you have to tell Alexa where to find it. So in other words, you need a podcast skill installed on Alexa. So whether it's, you know, iTunes or Spotify or one of those. And then at that point, I believe if you do that, you can get it too. I have not tried it yet, but I believe that's the case. So, Noel, how are you, Noel? Noel is in Puerto Rico and also a PhotoFlex light leader. And he's asking, what camera do you use for streaming? Do you apply any picture styles to the color? It looks good and crisp. So, let me give you the whole history there, because right now what you're viewing me through is an Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II with the 8mm fisheye lens on it. That's why we got the little bit of, perspective going on there. For the last couple of weeks, and for the last few weeks that I was streaming from my new studio, I was using a GoPro, literally just a GoPro 7. And I had taken the Olympus out of the loop temporarily because just on a whim one night, I had the second camera set up as a GoPro, and everybody was like, "Ooh, we really like that camera perspective. It's different." I was like, "Well, it's kind of fun, and with me and my hands, it kind of fits." So then I started using it for a little bit. Here's the downside. It's harder to control the bit rates and the volume of data that's coming out of the GoPros. Excuse me. So finally, when I set up this studio here at home, I wound up going back to the Blackmagic Design Ultra Studio, which is the mini recorder, excuse me, which is the converter that I'm using to take the HDMI signal out of the camera, put it in the computer. But it gives me a little bit more control over bit rates, file sizes, so that I'm not stressing the computer and I'm not overloading the stream. So like, right now I'm running this this whole presentation, this live stream, off of a 13-inch MacBook Pro that has 16 gig of RAM in it, which is the most you could put in the 13 inches. And fan's not running. It's super quiet. It's chugging along just fine. But yes, this is the EM1 Mark II with the 8mm f2.8 fisheye. And, it's interesting. And unfortunately, Olympus doesn't get considered in the live streaming game a whole lot because one of the things I've learned is there's not a lot of information online about streaming with Olympus cameras, unfortunately. I find them super easy to work with, and this is not because I'm an ambassador. Because I'm an ambassador, I tried streaming with them. And when I went to do that, I found that there was no information about the best setups, all that kind of stuff. So I do have a video that's coming out that's going to break all that stuff down for people that are interested. I know there's a lot of Olympus users that have reached out and said, "Hey, will you share your settings?" And I've shared the settings with them privately, but I'm going to do the video so that it's out there because there's a lot of other little tidbits of information that apply to all camera brands, which are a lot of the, shall we say, stumbles that I have made while learning to live stream. And for those of you that have watched me for any period of time, you have lived through so many of the foibles that I have dealt with in this entire live streaming setup. In fact, even without getting completely off track, even in the last week, I have spent probably the best part of a day and a half learning much, much more about networking cables than I ever thought I would learn, want to learn, or need to learn in my entire life. Basically found out that all the networking cables that I was using were actually working as bottlenecks in my bandwidth. So, and these were basic Cat5 cables that I've been using forever. Come to find out that Cat5 cables actually have a limit in how much data they can transfer. Cat8 is the current, top line standard, etc. So, yeah, it's been quite a learning curve. So I will be sharing all of that. Okay. All right. So, Torgier, and gosh, I hope I'm saying that name right. He says here, "You are the master of smooth graduated backgrounds." Well, thank you. What's the basic technique? I never seem to get that smoothness. Honestly, it starts with making sure that you have a smooth background, which is, oftentimes hard to do, especially if you're working with seamless paper that hasn't been well cared for. It's going to start to get some buckles. So, yeah, number one, you need a really smooth background. In terms of graduating it, that's simply a matter of essentially feathering how you're going to place your light, which is actually really, really easy to do. And I will tell you, Torgier, that I'm not beyond replacing a background in a studio if I am working on a color or working on a seamless that is not smooth and I can't get it as smooth as I want, then I will go ahead and replace it. But the overwhelming majority of smooth backgrounds of mine that you see were shot that way. That's how they appeared in the camera. But honestly, it starts with, having a really smooth background. And in part, it's important to understand why that's a big deal, is because while I have a separate studio, it's still only a 30-foot run. So it's not like I'm able to put my models 20 feet away from the background to smooth it out, because it's blurry. I still have my subjects fairly close to the background. One of the other ways, of course, to get your background smoother, now this isn't going to deal with the gradient, but to make things smoother is with less depth of field. But most of us that are doing portrait work of that are not shooting in a space that's large enough to be able to drop the depth of field down enough that it's going to smooth out a background. So when it comes to the gradient, honestly, it's simply a matter of start with a smooth background, and then obviously, like if this is the background, and let's say my subject's head is right where the ring is on my hand, well, then I'm going to probably have my light aimed down slightly so that the cone of the light is going to start to gradiate across the top here. Okay. So one of those things I could give you a ton of different explanations. What I would sincerely encourage you to do is honestly just keep practicing with it, because it is very doable, but it's just a matter of kind of really doing a little bit of practice to get the finesse points down. And then he's got a follow-up question here. Is any part of the backdrop that you're on green screen? And then he says, yes, you're on green screen, of course. So actually, one small part of my background right now is on green screen. Let me see if I can turn it off for you here really quick. So that's green screen that's behind me now. So you should be seeing that. And then I'm dropping in the logo. The reason why that's green screen, though, just so you know, and I'll share this with you guys on the next TOGCHAT. I will show you guys some behind the scenes footage. So as you know, when I set up my new studio, I got a little carried away and I thought, you know what? It looks like a neat space. So I want to do all of my live streaming and everything there. So I went and I set up a whole live stream studio in that space. And really, like an idiot, what that did is it knocked out a big chunk of my space. So here I was, spending money for this brand new studio space that I was really excited about, and it's a decent sized space, but I was cutting it down because of all the video work. So finally I was like, okay, that's really pretty ridiculous. So add to that, and again, I'm being really honest with you guys and really transparent about, some of the lessons you learn, because when you teach and you do what I do and you're on YouTube and you put out a video, it's kind of really easy to look like you're the most brilliant person in the world. I wish I was the most brilliant person in the world. So the other problem with doing my video work at the new studio is it's a 20-minute drive to the new studio. So like when I would do TOGCHAT, I would drive 20 minutes. I would be on TOGCHAT for an hour. I'd drive home 20 minutes. It really wasn't efficient. So of course, since I had this new studio, I have my old studio here in my home that was not being used. So I was like, you're an idiot, Joe. Bring the video stuff home. Set up a video studio here. So I'm looking at you through this EM1 Mark II, which is live streaming on YouTube right now. If I stand, which I'm not going to stand, my head will be out of frame, but if I stand and I look this way, I am looking at another EM1 Mark II that has a teleprompter and another microphone setup and an Atomos Ninja 5 monitor and recorder. And this is where I record my videos, my talking head videos that I do for YouTube as well. So basically this is kind of like a dual setup. This camera angle that's out here, the great part of it is there's a computer monitor that's literally right underneath the camera lens here, like my hand is just on the top of the monitor. You can see the TV back here. This view is looking straight between the two of them. They're not in the shot. The background is completely evenly lit. And again, I'll show you the pictures. I'm using the specular lights from Spiffy Gear to light this background completely even. And there's actually an iPhone app that you can use to measure the brightness areas of your green screens when you set them up. So the great part of it is when I'm doing a stand-up, I can go into Final Cut. And if you're into video editing, one of the things you learn pretty early on is that if you have a lot of green screen work to do, Adobe Premiere is much better with green screen than Final Cut is, unless you're going to get some kind of a plugin to use. Well, the great part of it is when your green screen's lit properly, it's one click in Final Cut and boom, the green screen's gone. Same thing goes if this was not lit evenly and not lit well, The software which I'm using, which is CreativeLIVE, would not be able to process that green screen in real time. It just would not do a good job of it. And of course, anytime you do green screen, you have to make sure that you're lighting it properly so that you're not picking up green cast. So the other thing that you'll notice is nicely done with lighting. I don't have any green cast on my face. There's no spill where I'm turning, alien green, that type of thing. And in my experience, that happens more often than not because the green screen is lit too brightly. So I will share the rest of that with you guys so that you can, see the whole setup. But I'll make sure that I have some of that for you next week. Okay. All right. So let me see what we got here. Darko, my next fun thing will be a photo zine that you are co-oping with a local model. Any advice on publication creation for a first timer? So Darko, I'll be honest, I don't entirely understand your question. So let me tell you what I think you're asking me, and then please fill in here. Let me know what it is. My understanding is basically you're going to do like an online photo magazine with a model. Is that what you're talking about? And if your answer is yes, please do me a favor and give me the answer to this next important question. Why? Let me know those two answers, and then I can help you out a little bit more here. Okay. I just saw somebody just asked, spinning wheels. What's the live feed program you're using again? This is a Mac only program. It's called CreativeLIVE. You can actually find it in the description of the YouTube video. It's ECAMM, CreativeLIVE software. It's Mac only. There's a lot of different softwares that are available for both Mac and for Windows. Probably on the high end is a program from a company called Telestream. It's It's called Wirecast. Very expensive, very robust. Their customer service sucks. You can quote me on that. Anytime that you have a problem, they tell you to rebuild your show files, which is actually a lot of work. They never take responsibility for bugs and issues with their software. I spent $1,000 on their software, and it was the worst mistake I've ever made in terms of software purchases. But it's considered to be top of the line, so maybe I was just an idiot. But I had horrible experiences with the customer service. If you're looking for free, there's a software referred to as OBS, and it's open source. It's free. It's actually incredibly robust, very powerful. It is a little clunky since it's open source. It doesn't have the budget behind it to really kind of streamline it and really tweak it the way some of these other programs are. But if you're a Mac user, CreativeLIVE, honestly, it's about as simple as it gets. It really is. The real issues with live streaming, it's understanding the bit rates. It's understanding how much data you are trying to push through not only your camera and your camera's processor, and actually the most important piece of your computer's processor. The most important piece of your computer, it's not the RAM, and it's actually not the processor, because most computers today have a decent sized processor. The important issue for your laptop is the processing speed and the RAM that is available in your graphics card. That winds up being the big issue for most computers when it comes to the live stream. So if you're hoping to be able to kind of do like a plug and play setup, Ecamm is honestly probably going to be one of your best bets, but understand it's not going to be foolproof. If you're trying to push through too much through the pipe, you're still going to run into issues. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, in that regard, if you're going to do it right. And many of you have lived through a lot of that learning curve with me with these TOGCHAT shows. So Bob Gamble here. Great to see John on the show. You live in Bellevue. I was just out that way. Met him in a class locally. Also took a personal class from him, and he's excellent. He is. John is just a great guy. He knows his stuff. So yeah, I mean, anytime that you see, he's speaking, or if you have a chance to check him out on CreativeLIVE especially, I very, very much encourage it. So Matthew, ignoring the cost, do you think that university is still worth it for a photographer? That is such a loaded question, Matthew, especially when I am married to a college professor, right? But here's my answer. And I think if I'm being fair, education is always worth it. But here's the problem. Education is only worth it if you, as a student, are going to work your ass off, right? So understand that no school, well, excuse me, let me rephrase that, that any school, any university, any YouTube video, any workshop instructor, any educational situation, all they can do is provide you opportunity to learn. That's all a school can provide you. Now, certainly some of what comes under that opportunity are the facilities. Maybe do they have a studio? Do they have cameras available for you to use or high-end equipment for you to use? If you're going to do film, do they have a dark room? Things like that. But all they can give you is the opportunity to learn. It's up to you to learn. And I know that this is, taking a pot shot at some of you as you sit here and listen to me, but hey, it's a little bit of tough love, right? This is why you hear me talk all the time about, please don't watch YouTube thinking that you're learning photography. You're tuning into this show every week, and I love you for being here. I really do. But I am never going to be upset if you're off shooting, ever. And please, if Wednesday night's a dead night for you and you like to tune in because it gives you something to do and you don't mind listening to this crazy guy, that's great. But please do not compartmentalize that in your mind as this was my photography practice or my photography education for the week. Sure, if you sit an hour and you listen to me, you're going to maybe pick up a nugget or two. And that's exactly what I hope will happen. But those nuggets are zero value to you unless you go out, pick up your camera, and actually try them. Put them to use. And that's science, folks. You can think whatever you want, but that's science. You, as adults, are experiential learners. You have to go out and do it to actually make it stick, okay? So Matthew's added a little piece here. He says to qualify that, he's looking at it as an opportunity to basically treat it as work for 3 years. I'm going as a mature student, so I have a bit of a different outlook. So certainly, Matthew, that's helpful. But here's the thing. One of the things you need to do is you need to put a lot of research into the actual program of the school. So you mentioned university, which makes me think, number one, you're not in the US, you're probably in Europe or the UK. So number two, though, what you want to be able to get a hold of, and generally schools will share this, is you want to be able to take a look at the syllabuses for the course. For those of you who don't know what a syllabus is, that's basically the course outline, right, of what's going to be taught, to make sure that the course is going to teach you the things that you need. And if your goal in taking these classes, Matthew, is to go out and run a business and essentially be a professional photographer, understand that most university or college photography programs are not going to teach you how to be a professional photographer. They are going to teach you how to be a technically proficient photographer. So what you also need to be doing while you're at university or at the college is taking some minors in business and marketing. If you're smart, Business 101, Marketing 101, maybe even a basic accounting class are all extremely valuable courses because the photography program is not going to turn you into a professional photographer. If it is a good program, and if you apply yourself, what it will do is it will give you the skills needed to be able to produce work at a consistent quality level that you can charge as a professional photographer. So that is a distinction that's really important that you understand if you go into that type of a situation. Okay. All right, Chris, looking at doing product photography for some major brand companies. Good for you. I have the 45 millimeter, the 40 to 150 millimeter, the 14 to 150 millimeter, and the 60 millimeter macro and fisheye. What lenses would you use, and what pro lenses should I look at in the future? So, Chris, I'd love to know more about what kind of product photography and what brands. And look, I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love, man. So give me a good answer. Here's the tough love. If you have to ask some guy on YouTube what lenses are the best lenses for you to use for product photography for major brand companies, so Chris, I'm using your words, you are probably not ready to be doing work for major brand companies, meaning you're probably not going to get hired. So please prove me wrong. Number one, tell me about what kind of products. Number two, let me know who the companies are and how you intend to get this work. And then I can answer it because, define product photography, right? Product photography could be a gas pump. It's 5 feet tall. Product photography could be this little bobblehead, which is 8 inches tall, right? So different lenses, different lighting, different studio needs, etc. So give me a little bit more detail and I will do my best to kind of help you out there, okay? All right, so let's see here. Scrolling on down. And so we got a little bit of a conversation going on. Just to point out, Dr. Pixels here mentioned that the Streamlabs OBS used for the Twitch channel is really robust. OBS is very robust. Again, people that have used programs like Ecamm or use programs like Wirecast, they tend to find OBS a little bit clunky, again, because it's the open source thing, but that doesn't make it bad, folks. In terms of what can you do with it, you can do pretty much anything with OBS that you would want to, okay? So, Ruth, we are getting together to practice tethered shooting. Good for you. You have Canon and Capture One, no issues. Everyone else has Olympus in various years. Is this possible to tether? Yes, absolutely, except, so follow along, Ruth, so I don't confuse you. Capture One supports Olympus files, right? But it does not support Olympus cameras. So if you're going to do tethering and you want to use Capture One, which I would encourage you, Capture One's great software, what you also need to do is download on the computer that you're going to tether to, download a piece of software called Olympus Capture Software. And I'll go ahead and I'll type it in here so you can go to the getolympus.com website and you can look for this in the download section, okay? Olympus Capture Software, it's available for Windows as well as Mac. That is the software that will allow you to tether with the Olympus cameras. Then what you do, super, super easy, in Capture One, you create what they refer to, Ruth, as a hot folder. The hot folder is going to be the folder where you are having Olympus Capture download the Olympus files to. And then what happens? It's real simple. Every time a new file pops into that folder, Capture One pops it up on the screen and says, hey, I'm ready to process it. Let's go. Okay. So basically, once you put the two pieces of software together, it's completely seamless. It works great, just like it does with any other brand camera. As to why Capture One doesn't support the Olympus cameras, I honestly don't know. But they do support Olympus files. So yeah, I use Capture One from time to time, and it works great. It's not a problem at all. Okay. So, all right, let's see here. Scrolling on down. So let's see. Oh, follow up from Matthew regarding the schooling. So he is in the UK. And it's MMU Manchester School of Art. So yeah, so Matthew, obviously I'm certainly not familiar with that school specifically. I can tell you that here in the US, the majority of art schools can be great at the art side of it and really, really suck at the business side of it. So you really want to make sure you're getting lots of information about what is actually in the program that you're going to learn. And then it doesn't mean, let's say they don't cover business, okay? That doesn't mean that it's not a good school to go to for the photography. It just means you need to really evaluate what are you going to be able to get out of their photography program. And then you need to go look for some other sources of education for the business side of it. So, that's every bit as important because you can have all the skills in the world and you're not going to be able to make any money if you can't run the business. Okay. So, let's see here. Eric, I know a guy that did some product photography for some medical gauges, I think with lots of glass. He had to learn about lighting too, as well as what lens he was using, if I remember correctly. Eric, are you trying to talk about me? If you're talking about me, I had to learn how to light that metal in glass, which was trial and error. As far as lenses, no, I didn't have to figure out what lens to do. If that was in a response to what I was referring to Chris before, I want to be clear about what I meant, okay? Making a statement that I'm going to do product photography for major brand companies, that's like, wow, pretty awesome. But, you know, looking at doing, that says to me I'm targeting major brand companies, okay? What that also says to me is I haven't shot enough product photography to go after major brand companies, okay? The company that I did that metal and glass shot for, if that's what you're referring to, wasn't a major brand company. It was a local company that hired me. I was way out of my league because I had never done it on 4x5. But the fact of the matter is I did a ton of research before I walked into that studio, and I nailed it, as I have shown you folks. So we're talking a little bit of a different, different situation here. I'm not discouraging Chris from going after it. I'm just saying I'm a little bit concerned about what his game plan is here. You guys know, keeping it real, right? I do this with models all the time. I had a consultation with a young girl today that wants to be a model, and she's got all these big dreams. And it's like, look, I'm sorry, but none of that's going to happen. And I don't like being the bad guy, but this girl's 5'4", and she wants to be a Victoria's Secret model. Well, you know what? It's not going to take place. So I'm a big believer in, look, let's keep it real. I didn't tell her to give up on modeling. I didn't tell her to give up on her dream. I told her, though, she's got to adjust her dream. She's got to make that dream more realistic. And then she can go out and she can do a ton of modeling. She's gorgeous. She has a great figure. There's no reason she can't be doing lots of modeling and having lots of fun. But if she goes after completely unrealistic goals, then really all she's doing is setting herself up to fail. So, all right, where are we at here? Let's see. I think I can get one more in here. Actually, another follow-up from Matthew. So since we're on this education thing, let's go ahead and hit this. So MMU, it's a full university. They have a business school too, possibly. Can do it as an add-on. Definitely see the advantage of studying business. Sure. And that's, I mean, that's the biggest thing with schools. And then the only other thing I will tell you, Matthew, which, again, this is by no means to discourage anyone from going to a college or university. But again, it's about being practical. As I already mentioned, all these schools can do is give you the opportunity to learn. It's up to you. One of the things that schools will not talk to you about, and this is why I really, really push that you need to do your research in the school. You should go visit the school. You want to see their facilities. And when I say see their facilities, you want to see their studios. You want to see their dark rooms. You want to see what computers they have in their computer labs. Photography is a big challenge for colleges, any school. And the simple reason is that the technology changes so rapidly. And it's so expensive. It's very hard for them to keep up. They can only dedicate so much money. The other problem that you have is, and this gets me in trouble all the time because my wife is a college professor, but the fact is, and I know they have similar things in the UK, Matthew, college professors become tenured. After a certain amount of time and work, they are tenured, which basically that means they have their job for life unless they break the law. So the problem is you get to a point where you've got professors teaching photography that learned photography many decades ago, but they are no longer currently doing the photography. Now, that's not everywhere. Let me be very clear. But unfortunately, locally here, I've dealt with a very similar situation in a local college for about the last 10 years. And routinely would have students knocking on my door saying, hey, we need your help because we're not learning a damn thing here. And we know we're not learning a damn thing here. And unfortunately, and I'll give you an example, the introduction to digital class that this college was teaching, in one semester, 15 weeks, the students would spend 4 weeks of that 15-week semester shooting and developing film so they could go and scan it to then learn how to do Photoshop. That was introduction to digital technology. I mean, come on, that's ancient history. So it's also, an issue of, do they have staff and technology that's up to date? Otherwise, you're going to be learning on outdated technology and learning with professors that have not kept up. That's not the case of every professor, so I'm not generalizing, but I'm saying it's a real problem. It's a legitimate problem that all schools deal with, right? So, all right, gang, we are 7:05. I'm late as always. There we go. So, awesome conversation tonight. Very focused. I appreciate it. So a couple of things real quick before we go. Number one, remember, Friday by midday, the TOGCHAT podcast will be live on all the platforms, including my website. You'll be able to download and listen to it and catch the rest of John's interview. And just like last week, there will be some additional photo news included in the podcast that we didn't have time for tonight. So make sure you check that out. Next week, I can't tell you the whole deal, but next week, I won't be here. So there's no TOGCHAT next week. You need another break. All I can tell you is I'm going to be out in the middle of a desert with a bunch of other Olympus visionaries doing some crazy stuff that I don't entirely understand what I'm doing yet. But I'll be there in a desert next week. The following week is Christmas week, and Christmas is on a Wednesday this year. So Monday, that'll be Monday the 23rd. That will be the next episode of TOGCHAT. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 2 Mondays in a row because the following week, of course, is New Year's. So we're going to do 2 Mondays, the 23rd, and then what it'll be, the 29th of January will be the next 2 episodes of TOGCHAT. One is going to have some gear features to it. The other one, I've got another interview coming up. I promise you guys that's going to be a regular ongoing thing. Not every week, but routinely. All right. So in the meantime, this is a really busy time of year, right? Got a lot of holiday shopping to do. Got a lot of running around to do. Got to go see families. Got to do all that stuff. Taking family pictures, it's not the sexiest thing in the world. For many of us, like me, I dread doing it. But you know what? It's part of the process, and it's great practice. So my challenge to you, gang, take lots of family pictures. Not with your iPhones, with your real cameras. But give yourself a challenge each time you do it. The pictures don't have to be epic. Please, they don't have to be epic. The pictures need to mean something to you and your family. That's all that matters. But give yourself a challenge. Maybe you're going to work on bounce flash. Maybe you're going to work on off-camera flash. Maybe you're going to work on doing better with natural and low light. Doesn't matter what it is, but give yourself an assignment that you're going to carry through those family pictures. And take your doggone cameras to all your family events. Take tons of pictures. You don't have to put them on Instagram. You don't have to put them on Facebook. They're not going to be in your portfolio. They're simply a learning opportunity. So please, as always, gang, thank you for being here tonight. And whatever you do, remember these